We have officially made it to the race week of my favorite street circuit on the F1 calendar. And that, of course, is the Singapore Grand Prix. Now, of course, at this track, we've had Crashgate with Renault and Alonso and Piquet Jr. What a story that was. Let's just say Alonso didn't get the most legal win of his career. Then last year we had Carlos Sainz winning for Ferrari in a year that was dominated by Red Bull, the only non-Red Bull driver to get a win that season. And of course George Russell did crash out on the final lap as well to add more spice to the pot. We've also had the collisions between both Ferraris, taking out Verstappen as well in 2017, which actually also took out Fernando Alonso again. So Alonso's not been the most lucky at Singapore at times. And plenty of more reasons why this track for me is so amazing. But anyway, let's get into the talking points and everything you should know going ahead into the Singapore Grand Prix. So first up, track-wise, remember there's not going to be too many overtaking sections, even though there's a lot of DRS straights. Singapore is a street circuit, it's quite narrow. You have to get your corners right, otherwise you won't get enough traction to overtake anyone. It's gonna be a lot of trains. However, it's still going to be a lot of good racing, as we know for the championship. If there's a good championship battle going on, glimmer of hope. So even if there aren't many overtakes, it's going to be a great race. But at Singapore, I doubt there's going to be too many. However, on that, there will be a new DRS zone between turn 14 and turn 16 added. Because basically this is the new section of the track that they last added, and basically they just never got around to adding a DRS zone to it. So now they officially have. Let's see if it helps. I mean, who knows? We're gonna find out during the race, of course. My thinking is it's still not going to be that useful, but hey ho, we'll see when the time comes to it. Now let's talk about who will score the most points in Singapore. Now, in the last two races, we've had two different constructors being the top point scorers. And of course, we've had in Monza, Ferrari, with Leclerc coming first and Carlos Sainz coming fourth. And then in Baku, we had McLaren coming first with Piastri and fourth with Norris again. So both first place and fourth place. However, coming into this circuit, it's very different to Monza and Baku, and this track got a very low average speed. It's got a lot of narrow corners. Again, it's a street circuit, narrow track, hard to overtake, slow speed corners, and just generally more average of a slower track. However, this means it's more of a track similar to the likes of Imola, Monaco, Zandvoort, and Hungary, which we've all seen this season have one thing in common. It's a McLaren-Ferrari battle. Now, Red Bull can get in the mix every now and then with them. However, normally these tracks again are McLaren and Ferrari. Mercedes can scrape in potentially. However, this is definitely going to be a McLaren track, 100%. I'm expecting them to be the top dog constructor, with Ferrari scoring the next best points and then Red Bull and Mercedes fighting it out for the final top 5 positions. So going into this weekend, expect McLaren to be the ones to beat. Now, of course, another story is that K-Mag is back in F1, of course. He's now had his race ban served. Bear in mind, the last time we had a race ban was 12 years ago, basically, with Romain Grosjean in 2012. Obviously, he had that massively famous incident in Spa where he basically completely pushed Hamilton into the grass. A massive crash. Very much deserved a race ban. However, out of this whole situation, we did get the greatest F1 parody song of all time. The streets will never forget X Matty G. Gone but never forgotten. But honestly, that just shows how rare it is to get a race ban. But also, your points get reset after every year. So now Kevin Magnussen has a lot of leeway to be his old self again, basically helping Hulkenberg get all of those points he can. So expect Magnussen to be his feisty self and has to be back in the fight for top 10 finishes, and Magnussen getting his elbows out to all of the other drivers. I wouldn't be surprised if he got another penalty point going out of this weekend. Then of course, you need to look out for Verstappen and Red Bull, because yes, they haven't really been impressing us recently, and I don't think it's going to be any different in Singapore. Now, I don't really like using last year's performances as analogies because the cars have changed so much since then, but Red Bull notoriously were dreadful at this track, and they have the same issues they had last season, so I expect them to be not amazing here again. Verstappen's got to be really careful here, because if Norris wins this race, I could see it being a Verstappen 5th or 6th place, and then all of a sudden Norris is only 40 to 50 points away from him. But honestly, going into this weekend, they have to hope they have pace, otherwise they have no pace anywhere on any circuit anymore. Monza and Baku, like I keep stressing, are very different tracks to Singapore. So if you come into Baku and Monza slow, fair enough, but in Singapore you have to be fast then. So if Red Bull aren't fast in Singapore, expect them to be slow for the rest of the season. Potentially they could be fighting for a podium, but for me, expect Red Bull not to be anywhere near first or second place. Now let's talk about team orders, because actually, like I've mentioned quite a few times, team orders will come into effect with Verstappen and Perez and Norris and Piastri. I expected to see it in Baku, but of course Norris kind of screwed up his qualifying. It was his fault, it wasn't his fault, it's the past. However, now going into this race, we know for a fact that if Piastri is leading and Norris is second, Piastri will give up the position. And the same thing applies to Perez. Now, in some magical turn of events that Perez is faster than Verstappen, then Perez will probably give up his place to Verstappen. But it's more likely or not gonna be something similar we saw McLaren doing with Baku for Red Bull, where let's say Norris or Piastri pits, Perez blocks them and slows them down to help Verstappen out. And again, Norris and Piastri switching positions will be the way for McLaren team order-wise. So expect some team orders to be used in Singapore, 100%. This is the first time we're going to see McLaren use it, and we're going to see Red Bull using it in the same race, I'm predicting. And then finally, for my talking points, we need to talk about how Williams is on such a roll right now. They have scored points in the last 2 races, and in my heart, the last 3, because I fully believe Albon would have scored points in Zandvoort if he didn't get disqualified, of course, from qualifying and got put to the back of the grid. So technically no, but I think they definitely could have scored points in 3 of the last races, and I don't think that's gonna stop now. Yes, it's a very different track, but like I mentioned, Zandvoort, Albon still had pace. I'm expecting Albon to do well here, and Colapinto. I'm excited to see what he can do. We saw Lawson was very good at this track, and he was a rookie at the time. Let's see if Colapinto can repeat the same sort of success that Liam Lawson had. But for me, I'm sticking my neck out on the line here, and basically saying, if Williams do not score points in Singapore, I will wax a bit of my arm hair or my leg hair. I haven't really decided yet, but that's how adamant I am that they will score points. So that is my big bet this weekend. Because honestly, I know we've got a great fight at the front with the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship, but let's not forget that wooden spoon fight between Williams, VCARB and Haas. Williams are rapidly rising through the pace. 10 points in Baku basically slashes that lead more than halfway. VCARB are really falling down. Haas are leveling out. They're going to meet in the middle, and I'm really excited to see who ends up getting 6th place. But anyway, on to my predictions for the Singapore Grand Prix. So this is the final section of the video, and I'll go through a few of my predictions. But first of all, my top 3, I have Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri and Charles Leclerc. Like I mentioned, it's going to be McLaren domination with Ferrari up next. I've then gone for biggest surprise of Pierre Gasly, purely because I saw what he could do in Zandvoort. I think he's going to do something similar in Singapore, and I'm expecting him to be close to, if not into the points. Now, biggest failure for me, of course, it will be Sergio Perez, because we saw how well he did in Baku, but again, that's kind of a cop-out because we all know Perez is probably going to be pretty bad. So my next failure is going to be Lewis Hamilton. Now, the reason for this is I don't think the Mercedes is going to be completely rapid. I think they're going to be in the mix with the Ferraris and the Red Bulls. However, we know how much Hamilton struggled with qualifying this season, and if it really is that hard to overtake around here that I think it's going to be, I think Hamilton could get stuck around 7th or 8th, potentially behind one of the slower Williams, who just have enough speed to keep him behind. And then finally, my final prediction for last place is Zhou Guan Yu. Of course, we knew it was going to happen. He had one good race in Baku, but normally people have one good race in Baku, Perez, and then go back to their normal ways. But anyway, that is all you need to know going into the Singapore Grand Prix. Those are all the headlines and the big stories that you should be looking out for, and all of my predictions to go along with them. So anyway, hope you all enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content, and get ready for some more F1 and F1 fantasy content on this channel. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all later. Bye bye.